Hello again, welcome back everyone. LiquorHound here with you, and thank you for joining me once again for another spirit review video. Today we're going to be taking a look at some really mature Scotch whiskeys. Now, they're from a brand, Dewars, been around forever. Of course, everybody knows Dewars is, hey, poured on the rocks, 3 fingers high, it's been a rough day. That's Dewars, right? It's been like that for many, many decades, okay? But it's a blended whiskey. And so blended whiskeys are a combination of basically single malt whiskeys that they gather from different distilleries, and they're blending those in with single grain whiskeys. Now, single grain whiskeys are from completely separate distilleries that usually have big column stills. They're running a corn or a wheat or a rye combination in with malt sometimes, and they're creating that whiskey, right? So single grain is just basically meaning a multitude of grains from a single distillery. And so that's single grain whiskey. Now, single grain whiskey, I tell people all the time when I'm talking to a bourbon drinker and they're thinking about getting into Scotch whiskeys, grain whiskeys is that bridge. Just like Campbelltown is the bridge from traditional single malts into peated Islas. I think Campbelltown is that perfect bridge. Single grains are a fantastic bridge into Scotch from bourbon because that has that corn component, and that corn component just adds a little layer of sweetness, and when it gets really old and mature can be phenomenal on its own. All right, old single grains are delicious. And so when you start talking about 21-year-old Dewars, 27 and 32-year-old Dewars, those single grains are every bit of that age. And when they get there, they start getting tropical. They start getting really fun and flavorful. And so when I saw these out, and I saw these starting back in, I think it was around 2020, 2019, at first I was kind of like, I don't know, because they came in, half bottle sizes, 375s, and you were looking at the 21 was like $50, the 27 was 75 back then, and the 32s were like 125, 135, somewhere in there. And, I was kind of like, I was real hesitant to pull the trigger because I was like, it's just don't know. I just don't know if it's going to be any good, and I'm busy buying other things that I'm trying to get reviews on that people want to know about. So I kind of waited, and through the years from 2019 on into 2020, of course, we all know what happened there. In 2021, we started seeing price increases. I started noticing the price was going up, not necessarily on the 21 because they were small back then. They were still at $50, but I saw this 27 and 32 start to creep up in price. From the $75, it went up to $100. From the 125, it went up to 150. And I was still okay with it because that's when that time is when I actually bought some. And I was like, $150 for a 32-year-old blended whiskey, malt and grain. I was like, at this flavor complexity, I was like, I'm okay with 150. That's basically $300 for a 750 milliliter bottle. I was like, that's about the limit for me. That was right there. And then came 2022, late 2022, going into 2023, and we saw the 21s come in this 750 size. They got really dark. Look at that color. And I was like, wow, 21 750 for $100. That's that heavily sherried. I'll take a flyer on it. So I picked that bottle up. The 27, again, still hanging, sitting around 125, 100, somewhere right in there. And the 32 took a jump from 150. I think Total Wine is now selling this for like $230. That's the breaking point. I can't do it. I can't even the quality that it is, I can't recommend that at that price point personally. But I know they're still out there at the, older bottlings at lower prices, so I decided, you know what? Let me shoot this video. My patrons are going to get to see it first. They're going to get that 2 week head start on finding those bottles. But hopefully, regardless of where you're watching, you can be able to know about these and get out there. And if maybe you've been passing it on your local store shelves all these years and you're like, I don't know. Well, now you know. Okay. All right. For fun, I picked this up recently. Cadenhead 7-star. Now, the 7 stars Cadenhead is a cask strength release, 48.2%. It's a 30-year-old blended malt blended Scotch whiskey. So again, it's single malt, single grain. And so I decided, you know what? I'll review this one for my patrons because this one is $150. It's 30 years old. It's not as heavily shared as some of these, but I decided, you know what? I'll review it there and we'll see which one's the winner and you can know which one to get. So again, if you can join me over at patreon.com/LiquorHound, greatly appreciate it because I self-fund all these bottles. It's not like I'm asking somebody to send them to me or having distilleries sponsor me or any of that. That doesn't happen on my channel. So anyway, all right, starting with the 21-year-old, and this is from 2022, 750 on the nose. Let me coat that glass really well. It's very, very dark on the sherry. Nicely done. You can tell it's the malt whiskey in here is every bit of 21 years old. Lots of depth. A little bit of peat in here, but not super heavy. Not even as heavy as, you know, some of the Campbelltowns. This is a wisp of peat. Lots of dark, like cola, blackberry, dark cherry, prunes and figs. Raisins, but more like in the golden raisin realm for this 21. Big, heavy, honeyed malt characteristic. Again, kind of that, it's baking spices, but to me it's more a little bit more on the clove, baking cinnamon, a little nut, little, you know, little shaving of a nutmeg, fresh nutmeg in here. A little bit of that old mahogany polish tone on the nose. Beautiful, beautiful nose on the 21. Let's go ahead and taste it while we're at it. Here we go. Oh, beautiful. For $100, it's ridiculous. It's a great buy. The grain whiskey component in here, again, has matured far enough ahead that it's no longer distracting. It's not like a young grain where it's just going to be hot and aggressive and, you know, like some of these young blends are. This isn't like that. This has a wisp of that tropical tone to it. There is a little bit of like a papaya, a little bit of like a little bit guava in here. But the first thing you notice, kind of a single malt characteristic. Big heavy malt, honeyed, wisp of peat smoke. Yeah, a little bit of that kind of, again, I say this a lot when it comes to like older malts or especially Campbelltown, Springbank malts. You get a little bit of that toolbox machine oil. Has a little touch of that in there. But that real beautiful sherry component, sherried malt is so heavy. Peat is so well balanced. Again, you're getting all that kind of fig and plum. A little bit of kind of like again, blackberry. But then you get that tropical note, and that's just a little bit of that grain in there with the and that guava, that little papaya. A little that coffee bean into that sherry on the back end. Old leather, old whiskey flavor kind of in the back end of this. In other words, heavy, rich oak, old leather. And all those fruit and sherry flavors just kind of wafting about. Drinking this water, I'm like, I know in my mind, I'm just like, you're cutting it short, you're cutting it short. Yeah, okay. Now we're going to move on to the 27. Now looking at the color on the 27, you can tell there's not as much of a sherried component as there was in the 21. It's not always a bad thing. You know, sherry is a nice attribute, right? It can be nice. It can also be a little, you know, heavy, domineering type of situation. So sometimes I like the purity when they're just more ex-bourbon barrel than there is the heavy sherried barrels. But let's take a look at this 27 on the nose. Yeah, much brighter on the fruit profile. Whereas this one was all that sherry, dark and dense. This was more into the pear, baked golden apples. The baking cinnamon's a little up in this one compared to that. There's almost a hint of like a pomace, grape pomace when you start getting into the stems and the skins. That's in here. It's kind of almost, it's a little wisp of like a sweet grass element to it. Underripe pineapple, maybe. But again, the malt is the focus, and I do like that about the 27. It doesn't have the big dense note that the 21 had, but it's cleaner. And you still get a little bit of that kind of tropical older grain with that pineapple, although it's not super sweet. But let's see if that changes on the palate. Oh my goodness. Pure old malt whiskey is what it tastes like. And then what I was saying by pure is purity. I was like, that reminds me of kind of like older Balvenie. Older Balvenies were kind of real clean, heavy on the malt, heavy on the honey. Just pure malt whiskey flavor. Just, you can almost taste that grain, but it's not super dry or anything like that. This is waxy on the palate. A little bit of that little orange oil in with those kind of baked pears, baked golden apples. Again, cinnamon is in there. That little shaving of nutmeg that I found in here, there's a touch, but it's like half the amount that was in this one is in the 27. Again, the pears and apples just dominating, leading the way, the big honeyed malt characteristic. Peat is in this one. Arrives about mid-palate. Doesn't feel as heavy as it did on the 21, which is kind of cool because you get to focus again more on that malt. That underripe pineapple tone is in there. Nothing more beyond that. Doesn't have that kind of mango or even like on this one, the papaya, the guava thing. This one doesn't have that. But I enjoy it. I really do enjoy it. And at that price point, again, about $100 for the 27, I'm not mad at it, okay? I don't want it to go over that. If it goes over that, I'm not going to buy it. But, you know, you're looking at $200 for a 750 of this. Super enjoyable. That spice that it has on it feels a little spicier than this one. But again, if you want to serve this on a rock or something like that, it's going to knock that spice edge right off. You want to add just a little bit of water to this, it's going to knock that edge off. Of course, just remember when you're adding water to any whiskey or pretty much any spirit, the first thing it's going to pop is going to be that spice and the cinnamon. So you kind of, the spice and the oak. So you have to let it kind of sit for about 30 seconds to a minute. It'll kind of reach a balance again, and that's when it's going to be at its peak. Oh yeah, that golden raisin is definitely in this one. The pears and the apples, lovely. Still has some of that old leather characteristic, so I really dig that. The oak is real clean. On that back end, wow, you really can focus on the fig on the finish. Okay. Again, we're going to need a double rinse on these. Heading into the 32, this bottle's a little low, but look at how dark it is. I dare to say it's just almost, I mean, it's a tiny bit darker than the 21, but not by much. All right, 32 on the nose. Oh my goodness. That's like if you took these two and combined them, because you still get kind of that waxy, yeah, that waxy honey malt character that was in this one is in here. You get that heavy sherry that you were picking up in this one with the figs and the plums, Christmas pudding type situation. It smells really old. Again, that orange oil in this one is just like orange oil mahogany polish in this one. Deep, rich malt character. When I start nosing past that into that sherry, you start getting into that, again, a little bit of that guava, wisp of that papaya. This one, so nice. It doesn't, as heavily sherried as this is, there's enough old malt character in it that it really kind of overrides the sherry. Like it's really nice. Okay, here we go on the taste. Ridiculous. That's why that was a deal. Even at 150, I was kind of like I was okay with it. This is why. Again, best of both worlds. Just imagine old single malts. You know, you're 32 years, and then you get that kind of tropical old grain influence on it as well. As it enters, again, super soft, rich, medium high viscosity, very oily, dense flavors. Again, kind of baked apples, baked pears. Maybe if you're flashing them in the pan, cooking them down, reduction with some brandy, and then you start putting in those kind of fresh figs. Oh, really nice. The coffee bean element is in that was found in this one is in this one. Yeah, I love the 32. I love them all for different reasons. Price point wise, it's hard to beat the 21. 27, to me, as much as I like it, I think if you're really big into single malts, you can appreciate the 27. If you're familiar with old malts, you'll appreciate it. But if you're looking for that instant gratification, right, it's going to be the 21 or the 32. Again, breaking point though. I don't want the 21 to go over. I don't want it to go to 125. I don't even really want. I'd probably still do it at 125, but I'm not doing it at 150. I'm not going to. Hopefully, they're not watching. Dewars. I'm kidding. Keep this at 100. Drop this back down to about 170, and we're okay. 225, don't buy this. Don't do it. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Of course, next for my patrons, I'm going to be reviewing this Cadenhead 7 stars blended Scotch whiskey, cast strength 30-year-old. How does it compare? Well, we're going to find out because I can tell you, as much as I love these, I'm not sure if this is a better buy, if we should be just stocking up on these or not this, but we're going to find out over at Patreon next. So join me over at patreon.com/LiquorHound. Help support this channel. It's only a $5, $10 tier. I do a lot of giveaways over there. You get the videos 2 weeks before they launch on YouTube, a complete private review library there. And so again, if you can, help support this channel and keep it going because this channel is all about helping you, my viewers. Thank you as always for leaving all those great comments. I'll get back to them just as soon as I can. Everyone have a great day and cheers.